Well, good afternoon, everybody. We are at the Web SwissCHI event 2020. So it's a virtual conference. It's session 4. And today we are going to listen to 3 presentations that are grouped under the session Gaze, Attention, and Body. So let's start with the paper presented by Kuno Kurzals from ETH. Is actually collaborating with, if I'm correct, some people from ETH in Zurich and the University of Stuttgart. That's actually the paper received an honorary mention, and I'm quite curious. It's about subtitles, how we can change the current subtitles below in the movies to adaptive or contextual subtitles, if I'm correct, Kuno.
Yeah, I will continue on that directly. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I start sharing. Can I start?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So as introduced, this paper will be about eye tracking and subtitles. So imagine you're sitting in front of TV, want to watch a movie, and turn on the TV, and maybe the movie is in a foreign language. You don't understand that good. So you turn on captions, and usually they appear at the bottom of the screen. And while you're reading, something else might happening, and you may be busy reading, might miss that. So we will refer to this type of captions as traditional captions. And the problem is that with the large distance between text and visual content, you might miss something. It's hard to focus on both, and that's a problem. So one way to compensate a little bit for that is that we find out where the speaking person is, and we place text close to the speaker, just like in a comic with speech bubbles. This technique has been presented a couple of years ago, and it's called speaker following subtitles. It basically identifies the speaker automatically and finds a good position for the text without occlusion of faces. The problem is that this only works for scenes where speakers are visible, but you also have scenes with off-screen speakers, and that's where this algorithm does not apply. And sometimes it's also not really predictable where the algorithm will place the text. So what we looked in this work was, imagine you sit in front of your TV, watch the movie with the subtitles, but this time you have an eye tracker on your TV, and we can measure where you look at and then adapt and optimize the position of the captions directly through your gaze. And with this idea, we can basically optimize where the text will be. You can directly start reading it, don't have to search for it that much. And we refer to this as gaze adaptive captions. And we implemented 2 approaches. The first one is called direct captions. The second one, salient sensitive captions. So let's have a look at the direct captions. The concept is really simple. It's basically where you look is where the text will be. So it ignores the conditions from the other approach and basically places the subtitles over important regions. So there might be occlusions. And the ideas sound simple, but we had to do some adjustments. So the first one is reducing text drift. So when you do a top left alignment of the text boxes to your gaze position, you start reading the text, and when you're at the end of the text, the new box might appear. And if you do this with the alignment, you cause a drift, and you will push with each subtitles your text boxes more and more to the border, and that's not good. So one way to compensate this a little bit is doing a center alignment, but we also have to find a good way to maintain reading consistency. That means while you're reading, the position of the text boxes will not change. So when your gaze is still in the reading box and a new one should appear, it will keep the same position. So you can just start reading again from the same position. And only if you leave the box and look somewhere else, the position of the captions will be adjusted. And this is how it looks like. You see, it's always centered where you look at, but you have the occlusions with the objects in the video. So one way to compensate this a little bit more is the idea of the salient sensitive captions. So there we want to calculate a displacement, a small displacement that can be done live. So we reduce these occlusions. And the important question here is, what is important content? So for this, we use a saliency map that we generated from a test audience that we recorded watching these videos under normal conditions. So we know what important regions of the videos are. And the algorithm basically works. We look at the gaze distribution for the region caption will appear. And we calculate a cost matrix, how many gaze points this caption box would occlude. So we can also derive a displacement map that shows us for every cell where the displacement would be best to reduce the occlusions. And this can be done by a lookup, so it's really fast and applicable to live content. So this is how it looks. The orange cell is the box where you currently look at, and the purple cell is where the displacement will be. And as you can see, the occlusions with the objects are removed with this approach, or at least reduced. So how does this affect gaze viewing behavior? We conducted a user study with 54 participants. Half of it was conducted in Stuttgart, the other half in Zurich. And we compared the three conditions, the two gaze adaptive methods and traditional captions. And we showed different short education videos from TED Ed. Those were videos with off-screen speakers. We presented them with no audio, and we asked our participants to answer some questions after each video. So they had to pay attention to the text and to the content of the video. And as a baseline, we recorded the videos from 8 participants with audio and no captions. So we have natural viewing behavior we can compare with in the end. So, and what we found out that looking at the saccade length, the average saccade length for traditional captions is significantly higher than with the gaze adaptive methods. So people have to move their eyes for longer distances with the traditional captions, and with the gaze adaptive methods, it's easier. You don't have to move your eyes so much, which might cause eye strain after a while. And if you look at average dwell times from previous work, we were assuming that the time on captions, on traditional captions, will be longer, because the former results indicated something like this. But in our results, we've seen that people spend significantly less time on the traditional captions and looked more on the captions with the gaze adaptive methods. Regarding the time to the first fixation after the onset of a new text box, we found that with our gaze adaptive methods, people looked significantly faster at the text, so they could also start reading earlier. And if we look at the gaze distributions, we calculated the mean square error in comparison to the baseline, where we also found that both gaze adaptive methods were significantly lower mean square errors than the traditional method. And to show you what that means, I have a picture of the heat maps. So in the top row, we have the gaze distributions for all the videos that were shown. And in the bottom row, we have the heat maps for the traditional captions. And as you can see, there is this big focus on the bottom of the screen. And with our methods, we removed this focus from the bottom and created a representation that is much closer to the natural viewing behavior. So what are the takeaways? We found out that the target group is very important. Inexperienced participants preferred the gaze adaptive methods more. The displacement distance for the salient sensitive captions is very important. So we have to do more experiments to find out what are the best distances to choose from. Occlusions were not that much of a problem as we thought in the beginning, but alternative representations to make captions more see-through might help. And perceived pace for direct captions seemed that it was a little bit perceived slower than the other methods. So maybe the reading consistency gave them the impression that it's not so hectic anymore. Okay, to conclude, I presented two techniques for gaze adaptive caption placement. They are good for inexperienced people. They create gaze distributions closer to natural viewing behavior, and they are applicable to label placement in general. So for future work, we want to apply this in mixed and virtual reality, especially for gaze adaptive head-up displays that optimize presentation of information. So when you have this information overload, like in this picture here, gaze adaptive methods might also help to focus more on important parts. And we want to adapt additional parameters with gaze. So for example, adjusting the playback speed of a video might be one idea. So that's the end of my talk. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Kuno. I see that there is one question on the live chat, and I had the exact same question. I had another one before, but no, let's go to that one. What do you do with what's your plan for the multi-viewer case?
Yeah, that's a quite obvious question. So eye tracking of multiple people is still not very progressed. That's why we were thinking more about this mixed reality approach. So when you have your individual headset, that might be something that's also applicable for multiple users.
I had another question concerning you mentioned the time on caption. You measure the time on caption. And I was wondering, did you also measure the time to go to the caption? Because I don't really get the time on caption should be the same.
That's the time to first fixation. So we measured from the onset when a subtitle appeared, how long did it take until the participant looked the first time at it? Was that the question?
No, you said that the time on the caption, sorry, I'm slow because I'm trying to read the question on the chat. The time on the caption is longer with the traditional method, you said.
Yeah, so our assumption is that because we placed the captions directly in the image, that people were not always reading just the captions, but were also looking through it. So they were see-through. And of course, if it's on the face, we cannot differentiate if they look at the text or at the background. That's one thing we still have to investigate in more detail in the future.
And you said as well that the people that are unexperienced, it works better with those people, the adaptive solution. But I was wondering if you observed some change over the experiment, that they don't have a linear performance, that they change their performance over. I mean, does it mean that people that are used to read caption at the bottom cannot change their habit, their eye behavior?
I mean, we also had people that watched a lot of subtitled movies. They said that the direct caption approach is also good, but in general, more than half of the participants that had a certain degree of experience, that were watching a couple of hours a week. They preferred the old method because they say, okay, I'm used to that. I know where they will always appear, and I'm fast enough to read the subtitles. That was basically the main reason for them to choose the old method. So if you are efficient enough, you can read the subtitles fast and go back to the content and so on. But people who are not that used and don't read captions very often, they I mean, I have the same problem. I also don't use it that much. You get stuck at some point. You're always drawn to the text. You're distracted from the content. And for those people, it seemed more comfortable to use the captions directly included in the content.
Great. And can I ask a final question, Ahmed? Or
yeah, sure.
It was not really clear to me what was the satisfaction of the user. Was it correlated with the performance?
Well, in the performance for the questions, they did not really differentiate. So the results were really similar for the different conditions.
But the satisfaction overall, the satisfaction of the different conditions?
So yeah, we did not include this here. We also evaluated this with a questionnaire later on. That's in the paper. If you are more into details on that. Yeah, I could not include it for time reasons here. But yeah, the comfort for the direct approach was, as I mentioned on the other slide, they said it's not so hectic when you have the direct captions. It seemed easier to read. And
so the last question from the chat, I see that some people wonder, because when you know the language, sometimes you only read the caption when you need. And would there be a way with your technique to have this paradigm that you go to the subtitle only when needed?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we would have to derive how much interest there is. That's also what I wanted to say with adjusting the speed. So after we found out that inexperienced people prefer that, we tried to experiment. If people have problems reading the text, we can find out if they are still reading and then slow down the video until they finish. So doing this subtle is another challenge, but the idea is, if we see that they are really involved in reading the text and will not finish in time, we can adjust and help them. And this would be the other way around. So if they are not really looking at the text, we might reduce this much more. Yeah. The good question is when to start again, when to find out when they would need it.
Well, thanks a lot. I don't know, Ahmed, if you wanted to ask a question. I see why the paper received an honorable mention. It's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks.
Ahmed, I can continue to the next paper?
Yes, please, yes.
Okay. So next paper is about visual attention. If I remember correctly, it's about quantifying the user visual attention during everyday mobile device interaction. And that's a paper again from the same, I don't know, you have some overlap, I guess. It's with people from ETH Zurich together with people from University of Stuttgart. And Mihai Base, or Bache, I don't know, you'll tell us your pronunciation, will present the paper. Go ahead.
Right. So yeah, thank you for the introduction. So today I want to talk about understanding and quantifying users' visual attention during everyday mobile device interactions. So there's, just a second. Yeah, so we will talk about attention, what we mean by attention, why we have chosen mobile devices, and when we say quantification, what exactly do we want to measure. But first, let's discuss about attention. So why is attention relevant? Well, attention has many benefits. For one, it can help us model user behavior, for example, user engagement, attentiveness, alertness, or boredom. Attention is also highly relevant in areas for assessing interruptibility or finding the opportune moments to deliver messages or notifications. Attention can also be used to reason about the future, for example, to forecast user visual attention or to predict where the user might want to look next. Now, all in all of these sub-areas can bring us closer to the vision of attentive user interfaces. And these are interfaces that can adapt and respond to human attention. But since we talk about attention, what is attention? Well, it turns out that there is no common definition or understanding for attention. In general, it is referred to as the concept which describes how we process information in our environment. Now, generally speaking, attention can be characterized into covert attention, which is concerned with one's mental focus without moving one's eyes, and overt attention, which is also known as visual attention. And this can directly be observed in terms of eye movements. In my talk, whenever I will mention attention, I will mean visual attention. So why do we focus on mobile devices? Now, if I showed you this photo, I think most of you are very familiar with this. Well, perhaps not during the current lockdown measures, but we do use our mobile devices all the time in different scenarios and so on. And because of this, the way we use our phones and the way we interact with them have changed significantly in recent years. Already 15 years ago, there is previous work that shows that our interactions with mobile devices are not only highly fragmented, but can last as little as 4 seconds. There's also similar conclusions if we look at tasks that are performed during interaction on a mobile phone, which could, for example, hinder productivity. Moreover, there's also negative consequences associated to smartphone overuse that can lead to attention deficits, sleep deprivation, or in certain cases, even to mobile phone addiction. Now, the study of attention and how people use their mobile devices, there's more than just research interest. As some of you may know, both Apple and Google devices have, for example, a feature that can quantify how much time we spend using our mobile devices, depending on the time of the day, taking the application that is currently used, and so on. However, in this case, if we want to extrapolate from this interaction, attention means the amount of time the screen is on. However, we argue that through screen time, we cannot really capture the highly dynamic nature of visual attention. Now, our contribution in this paper is twofold. First, we present a novel dataset called the Everyday Mobile Visual Attention Dataset, which contains videos recorded from the front-facing camera of off-the-shelf mobile devices. And on this dataset, we present quantitative evaluations of visual attention of mobile device users in situ. This without using any special purpose eye tracking equipment. So let's have a look at our dataset. So as previously mentioned, the EMVA dataset contains videos collected from the front-facing camera of a smartphone. Besides the video data, we also recorded sensor data such as accelerometer, gyroscope, device usage logs, for example, the application running in the foreground, interaction events, so whether the user touched their screen or not, and even location data, which has been anonymized to location types. Now, to collect all of this data, we developed an Android application that ran in the background, and this recorded participants during their everyday routine. Now, because of the extensive data collection, we did have in place several features to protect the user's privacy. For example, no data was uploaded without the user's consent, and users had to review their data before uploading it. So here, just a few samples of images from our dataset. As you can see, there's quite a few different variations in appearance, different environmental conditions, both indoors, outdoors, different people doing different activities. Now, let me briefly mention a few of the characteristics of our dataset. This dataset was collected over a period of 2 weeks, and participants who completed these 2 weeks were compensated. we had 32 participants, 20 male, 12 female, of different age, and they used a wide variety of Android devices. In total, these 32 participants shared over 14,000 videos with us, or on average around 450 videos per person, which amounts to around 472 hours of video data. Now that we have this data set, how can we get to the quantitative evaluations of visual attention? Now, if we look at the context of attentive user interfaces, well, the key challenge in mobile HCI is to understand when, how often, or for how long people look at their mobile devices. And one modality that can help us do that, and the one we used in our paper, is eye contact. So for this, we use a method to detect eye contact devices on mobile devices. This is a method based on machine learning. However, describing this method in detail is beyond the scope of this paper, and for this, you can have a look at our paper on arXiv. The core idea of this method is that given a certain image taken from the front-facing camera of a smartphone, we can predict whether the person was looking at their mobile device or not. Now we take this method and we apply it on the entire data set that we collected, and then we automatically label every single frame with either eye contact or no eye contact information. Now, once we annotated our data set automatically, how can we quantify visual attention, and what exactly do we measure? Well, for this, we defined several visual attention metrics, and these are only just a few of them. So whenever I mention a video recording, this begins whenever the user unlocks their device until the moment the device gets locked or it goes into standby. By labeling each frame with eye contact or no eye contact information, we can extract, for example, the duration of sustained visual attention, or the duration, the continuous duration that the user was looking at their phone. Another attention metric that can be highly relevant, for example, to detect distractions, would be the number of attention shifts. So when the user looks from the device to the environment and the other way around. Now, based on these attention metrics, we identified a number of interesting findings. For example, the average duration of sustained visual attention was around 7 seconds. Now, the duration of the first attention span, or the duration of attention after unlocking the device, was around 11 seconds. On average, in a video recording, there were between 4 to 5 times when the users looked away from their device to the environment. Now, if we look at other characteristics of visual attention, we can analyze attentive patterns over the course of a day. For example, what we identified was that the duration of sustained attention decreased from the morning, which was around 9 seconds, to around 6 seconds in the evening, and even shorter at night. While this is not particularly surprising, it is nice that we can measure this for the first time in the wild, in situ, without the need for any special purpose equipment or tedious and manual data annotation. Now, we also analyzed attention across different application categories or different contexts. However, for this, I would invite you to have a look at our paper. Now, in conclusion, we would like to stress that eye contact, and not only eye contact, but eye contact detection, is a powerful tool for analyzing overt visual attention in situ. Using such a method, we can gain rich insights into attentive behavior, including quantifiable metrics. Now, similar to previous findings, we would like to show that visual attention in mobile HCI is highly fragmented. Now, this underlines a need to develop a new generation of attentive user interfaces that can actively manage and protect such a valuable resource like attention. And last but not least, we would like to stress that visual attention is both user and context specific. Proxy methods like Apple Screen Times can indeed be used to a certain extent. However, they do not fully capture the highly fragmented and individual characteristic of attention. And with this, I would like to open for questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot, SwissCHI, for the nice presentation. I invite people to ask questions on the chat, but please, small questions, not because if I have to speak and read the question at the same time, it's difficult. So if I understood correctly, you had some kind of ground truth that you made manually. How did you annotate this in order to train your algorithm?
So that's a very good question. So first of all, the method that we use for detecting eye contact, so the method is fully unsupervised, so it can be trained without any manual labels. So this is one of the advantages, is that our data set has, well, over 400 hours of video data, and each video was recorded at around 30 frames per second. So manually annotating this data by a person is simply impossible. And this is why we needed to look for methods that can do this without manual labeling. Now, for control, we did collect around 10,000 manual labels through crowdsourcing. So I did not show this in our presentation, but the application that the study participants had also had a data annotation component. And they could, for example, label some of the images and help us understand how well our algorithm performs.
I was surprised that you used the term eye contact for this kind of interaction. Is it from the literature, or it's coming from you?
So, well, I mean, it's not really interaction in a sense that it's explicit interaction. So, you know, users simply use their mobile phone just as they would use it during everyday routine. So checking emails, writing messages, and so on. And the camera would be recording them during these interactions. So from this point of view, there is no, let's say, interaction required from the study participants.
I see some questions from people on the chat asking if what about other type of devices? Maybe users use more tablets during the evening. That could explain the data that you collected.
Well, sure, it's possible. Just in our case, we focused on smartphones. So yes, that's definitely possible. But
you did forbid the user. They were forbidden to use any other device, or?
Well, they were not. They were not forbidden, but the application that we developed for data collection was designed only for mobile phones, not for tablets. So essentially, if in the evening they decided to leave their phone and do something on the tablet, that was perfectly fine. And again, this would only highlight that our data set is collected in a natural environment, because this is what users would normally do. Forcing participants to, for example, only use only the mobile phone during the data collection could potentially alter their natural behavior.
There are quite some questions now. I'm not going to be able to ask them all, but there is one about differences between indoor and outdoor visual attention. Did you observe anything about that?
So, yeah, that's also a good question. Unfortunately, we did not look into this. So we did not analyze. For this, we would have to develop a method that, based on the images, can identify, for example, whether the video is mostly indoors or outdoors, or perhaps try to use the location data to infer this information. Because extracting whether a video is indoors or outdoors is not trivial. So this would be a computer vision problem first. And then once we have this information, we can perform similar analysis to what we did in our paper. But of course, this is a good point. So
another question concerned I had a similar question, actually. The use of other data, like accelerometers in the chat, the person is suggesting that, or interactions or notification, or because you could maybe predict the visual attention using other logs that would be easier to collect, actually.
Yeah, so I mean, this is also one of the reasons why we collected such an extensive data set. So collecting this data is honestly quite challenging, because you need to set up quite a lot of infrastructure to gather these videos. And this is why we thought that it makes sense to collect additional sensor data, like, you know, the accelerometer, the device usage logs, and so on. Now, in our analysis, we only focused on the video data, and we did not look at all the other sensors. But what the question is, again, highly relevant, because there could be context, for example, where other input modalities or other sensors could be a good proxy for user attention. So we might not need to record the users all the time and have video recordings, but for example, in certain scenarios, it could be that a simple proxy as the screen time would work well enough.
Thanks a lot, Mihai. It's really interesting. There are plenty of questions, so I guess your research was interesting to a lot of people. Thanks a lot again.
If people want to discuss this further, I'm very happy if they can get in touch, and yeah, I'm happy to share our experience and our knowledge so far. So
the dataset is available. Yeah, I see the link, so it's perfect. Okay, thanks a lot again.
All right, yeah, thank you.
So now we have a final presentation. So this one is shorter, from Jody Allen together with my colleague from the University of Neuchâtel, Adrian Rozer. And I think the transition is perfect. It's about how to maybe get away from screens and put our attention, well, not the visual attention, but to the real world. That was my understanding, through gaming. Jody, maybe you can say, so the title, well, is Playful Dance Scaffolding Through Motion Detection.
Great, yes. 1 second. Yes. Hopefully that will be okay. Okay. Hello. Thank you for the introduction, and good morning from Canada. As introduced, I'm Jody Allen, a humanities PhD student at the University of Concordia in Montreal, and my research is on digital physical games. Today I'm presenting a late-breaking work entitled Jingle Jigsaw, Playful Dance Scaffolding Through Motion Detection. My co-author is Adrian Holzer, a professor in human-computer interaction from the University of Neuchâtel. Video games are more popular than ever, with people spending around 7 hours of their week playing. At the same time, screen time is associated with adverse effects on the body that can include obesity, poor sleeping habits, or lowered attention span. Video games dubbed exergames emerged as a way to influence players towards physically active gameplay. Within this genre, dance games have been some of the most popular, and early research on such games has shown that they can positively affect social life and physical health of users. We therefore propose the following research question: how to design a playful dance game that doesn't use a screen interface. In this paper, we present the design of Jingle Jigsaw, a novel screenless dance game that exclusively uses movement as input via camera tracking and sound as output. We conducted a preliminary usability evaluation that conveys the fact that such interaction is perceived as enjoyable by users and pointed to promising future work. Despite the growing popularity of movement-based games, researchers argue that the diversity of movement and interactions are still underexplored. Dance games in particular propose a mimetic gameplay, where players copy movements that are shown on screen. Alternatively, Jingle Jigsaw is a connect-based puzzle dance game. The goal of the game is for players to find and assemble pieces of an audio puzzle using dance-like movements. In the game, the puzzle to be solved is a song, and the pieces of the puzzle are sound clips that are assigned to virtual boxes in the physical dance space around the player. The player can't see the boxes, so they must explore their immediate space to find and activate them in the correct sequence in the correct timing. The mechanics are simple, mere button presses, but the gameplay still allows for a wide range of movements and responses. Players might use their hand, their head, or even their foot to trigger the same box. Figure 1 shows how a player is perceived by the Connect motion sensor, and Figure 2 shows a player activating the virtual boxes with her arms. Two of the key thinkers on movement game research and design are Catherine Isbister and Florian Müller. For this paper, we used their guidelines for the design of movement-based games and their relevance to HCI. They proposed 10 guidelines grouped into 3 clusters. For the sake of brevity, I will only pull out one guideline to expand upon. Is Bister and Mueller right that movement-based design should focus on the body of the player? However, they also note that this guideline received pushback from some of their expert study participants. The participants who worked in the commercial video game industry counseled against focusing on the player. They said because some players feel shy when they are the physical center of attention, the screen aspects of the game help to alleviate this pressure on players. In imitation dance games such as Dance Central, the choreographies are often stereotypical gendered representations of the dance. In this case, focusing on the body could evoke negative feelings for players. To overcome this issue, Jingle Jigsaw focuses on outcome rather than on precise movements, which lets participants explore motions on their own. By players being allowed to perform movements they are more comfortable with, rather than stereotypical dance steps, we aim at designing a more positive focus on the body and thereby alleviated the need for a screen as a distraction away from the body. We conducted preliminary evaluations with 3 expert user groups, dancers, gamers, and musicians, to focus on different aspects of the game. Dancers were tested on 2 separate occasions. A first evaluation was conducted with 6 experienced dancers in Lausanne, Switzerland, and the second evaluation took place at Concordia University in Montreal with 6 students from the Department of Contemporary Dance. The gamer play test was with members of the Technoculture and Games Lab at Concordia as well. There were a group of 8 people, 3 people played the game and the rest spectated. Finally, we conducted 2 additional play tests with a total of 9 mixed play testers that included 4 female and 2 male experienced musicians. The play tests each lasted 1 hour with a discussion minutes. Our preliminary evaluations concur with previous findings that show dance extra games are enjoyable for expert users. The game was received very positively, and players were creative in the way that they played the game. Future work will investigate a broader user base and will further look into relevant health aspects. Another point that could be further investigated in a screenless digital game is the player-spectator role. In traditional video games, meaning not movement-based games, spectatorship tends to focus on watching the game on screen. This can be in a social situation where others are locally present, but can even be generally argued that players become spectators to their own gameplay because they are watching their own performance on the screen. Research on movement-based games notes a shift in spectatorship towards a split focus on the screen and on the player's performance in physical space. Our screenless digital game presents an interesting case for study. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. And if there are any questions, I can answer them now.
Yeah, thanks a lot for Jodie, for the presentation. I think we are a bit late now. Maybe I will go to the question.
Yeah, my timer stopped late.
I was wondering about the visual feedback, because if you have no screen, it means you have no visual feedback. So how do you know where to activate which sound or which music? If you need some kind of visual feedback, or visual sign on the floor, or
yes, that what we found works best is to mark out a play space on the floor. So in terms of visual feedback, that is true. They have spatial markers on the floor, sort of in the general, defining the general play area, so that all of the boxes are then within reach of them. But other than that, they're relying on audio feedback. So when you find a box, it plays the sound. So if I'm touching it here, I know now that there is a box here. And it's a memory. So it's a physical memory. It's like a game of memory. So you unveil the box. You have to remember the location in space and then be able to trigger it again.
Okay, thanks a lot. Again, I think we are running late, so but I think your work deserves a demonstration. I hope soon will. Is it in a museum or something, or do you plan to have this kind of installation somewhere?
Yes, it's not anywhere yet, but I'm hoping to have it as part of an immersive arcade, hopefully in the fall. But I'm not sure what our world will be like in the fall. We can do that.
Hopefully in Switzerland as well. Yep.
That would be great. We'll see.
Well, thanks again for all the speakers and the very nice presentation. I think we are going to take a break and come back at 3:50. So it's only in 5 minutes, actually. So all the best to everybody, and hopefully see you soon physically.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye. Ciao. Ciao.
Hello, welcome everybody to the fifth session of the SwissCHI 2020, where my name is Mauro Cherubini. I'll be chairing this session. And today, this afternoon, we have three wonderful papers. The name of the session is somewhat cryptic, and I couldn't tell myself exactly what was the overall or overarching theme between these three papers. But in short, I think the first paper is going to focus on privacy communications, the second on deception in UI, and the third on linked data. So I'd like to introduce the first speaker today, Nico Ebert from the Zurich University of Applied Science. He's going to present joint work done with Peter Heinrich and Kurt Alexander Ackermann. And the title of the paper is Does Context in Privacy Communication Really Matter? A Survey of Consumer Concerns and Preferences. And it's my pleasure also to tell you that this paper received honorable mention from the reviewers. And so the goal of the paper was to conduct a study on privacy policies, something that every single users of technology will be concerned with. And so I let the speaker present and take the floor now. Thank you. Nico, you are still on mute.
Okay, thank you very much, Mauro, for the introduction. So we're in the field of data privacy. And like in the subtopic, let's say, of privacy communication, meaning organizations and companies talking to us and telling us what they are about to do. And I'm gonna like show you or introduce you to our very let's say, exploratory paper in this area. So we wanted to know what kind of difference does context make in the relevance of privacy information, and therefore we ask some users. Okay, so you're all probably aware or maybe even unaware of privacy notices that we all, let's say, see on a daily basis and we don't read, and they are still pretty common in the field because of like compliance reasons and other reasons. So this is still the main, let's say, tool to talk about privacy practices. They are often long, they are very seldom read. So a recent proposal suggests to make them more relevant. There have been many approaches to make privacy notices more relevant, for example, icons. But this recent proposal focuses on putting short, just-in-time notices in the transaction context of the user. So let's imagine you have some kind of app and you have to enter your name or your email address, and then a very short, tiny notice, a piece of information will pop up telling you like that your email address is not shared with third parties. So that would be an example of this kind of short and relevant just-in-time notices, which are complementary in a way to these long, legally required privacy notices. And nowadays, many companies start make use of this kind of just-in-time notices or short notices. For example, you probably have seen in WhatsApp when you start a new chat with somebody that your communication is encrypted. If you have installed Apple Pay on your device, there's a short notice saying where your credit data is transferred to. You're all aware of these cookie banners. And we can discuss whether these make sense in a way, but it's, let's say, it's an attempt of making privacy communication more contextual, and that's basically the area that we did our research in. So we, let's say, took a pretty naive approach we said, okay, in order to find out what is contextually relevant for the user from all these, let's say, broad like privacy policies, we thought, okay, let's ask them first. Let's really do the naive approach of asking users what they consider relevant. And we have like basically two main research questions. One is how concerned are consumers regarding their privacy, and what are privacy information preferences in a particular context. So concerns on the one hand, and privacy information preferences on the other hand. And is there a contextual difference? So does it make any difference when I'm confronted with different contexts? That are our two main questions. So what we did was basically selecting two contexts, and we selected one context, which is loyalty cards that you, for example, use when you go to a store and show in order to collect bonus points. And the second context is fitness tracking, and we basically recruited people from a panel. We displayed to one set the loyalty card context and explained them. Just imagine you are using loyalty cards, and we introduced to the second set of people this fitness tracking context and told them, okay, imagine you're using fitness trackers, and afterwards we simply asked them, what are your privacy concerns in this context, and what are your privacy information preferences? So what kind of privacy information would you consider as relevant? Okay, the first is privacy concerns. We use a standardized scale, the concerns for information privacy instrument. And on the left-hand side, you can see the outcomes of the loyalty card concern. On the right, the fitness tracking concern. Let's say 4 is more or less some neutral concern level. Everything above means you're concerned somehow in a way. And what you can see is that on this, like, let's say, high abstraction level, the concern pattern is very much the same. You can see significant differences with small effect sizes, for example, for error concern and collections concern. But for example, when it comes to secondary use, which means like using your data for like other topics or giving your data to a third party, it's pretty much the same concern level in both contexts. Okay, we then ask the users for their privacy information preferences. So what kind of privacy information would you consider relevant? We used categories based on the GDPR of the EU and their guidelines. They distinguish between different kinds of information categories, like, for example, personal rights information. You have the right to opt out, information on processing purposes, information on, for example, how long is your data stored, like storage period. And we also translated these kind of categories like in a more simple language, so that people were able to understand what kind of information these were. And then we ask again, like, what do you consider relevant here? And what you can see here is basically that the effects are like very small again. So neutral is somehow in the middle. To the right, you see I consider this kind of information relevant, and I had to add some like small bars so that you can see where significant differences actually are. Meaning that, for example, people would consider information on their personal rights in this context more relevant than, for example, the contact name of the data privacy officer that is like just at the bottom. Just a side note, if you look at many privacy notices today, the name of the contact data privacy officer is sometimes at the top. So they in the field, it's currently considered like being important. Again, these are only like minor differences, very small effects between these two contexts. Okay, let's conclude. Regarding the concerns, privacy concerns, we found something called a hierarchy of concerns, which has been discussed in the literature before. and we also found something like let's say, small hierarchy of information preferences. The differences are like just of a minor type. We generally have very small effect sizes. And that also brings us to the main limitations of our study. So this was let's say, first approach to ask the user for their privacy communication preferences. And we started on a very high abstraction level. So we said, like, imagine this using the card. We had like very abstract, let's say, concern categories and very abstract information categories. So we were on a very high and abstract level. Regarding these two contexts, you can say you should probably address secondary use and improper access concerns over errors and collection. And regarding the privacy information preferences, you should probably focus on the personal right and less, for example, on the contact information of your data privacy officer. Further research, next idea would be to look at a context in much more detail. Let's say, an example, an app with specific screens, and asking people again what information is relevant now, and also taking a very concrete privacy policy of a company. My students did this already with the privacy policy of Twint, and asked the users, for example, is data sharing with Google Analytics okay for you or not? How relevant is this information? And the second topic for research in this area is like testing the actual relevance with an experimental design. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm going to clap the hands for everybody. Thank you very much, Nico, for this great presentation. And while we wait like a few questions to populate, I like to start with a question from Alessio from the same session. Is asking, how were the data collected? Was it the same user sample?
So it was like two different groups of users. So we recruited about 650. When I imagine, we split them into two groups, and one group got one context, and the other group got the second context.
Great. So I like to ask you like another question. I was particularly interested in the reasons why you involved non-users into the study. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on the rationale for involving non-users into the sampling.
So our idea was that probably non-users might have different concerns, meaning that the reason for not using like a loyalty card or a fitness tracker could be because of a specific concern. So we hoped, or that was the basic idea, to see a different pattern, but in the end also the pattern was very similar between users and non-users.
Okay. So you didn't see any difference between these two groups of users?
If I have time, I can just go to the backup slide and show.
Of course, you have like around like 10 seconds. But
okay, 10 seconds. Let's.
I think it's a lot. I mean, if
Okay, just have a look. There is a difference, for example, when it comes to collection concerns between users and non-users in the loyalty card context. But again, it's like not a totally different pattern.
I see. Okay, thank you very much, Nico, for this presentation. Thanks a lot. I'd like to move to the second presenter of the session. And so I would invite Linda to set up the slides in the meantime.
Yes.
And so the title of the paper is UI Dark Patterns and Where to Find Them. The work will be presented by Linda Di Geronimo from the University of Zurich. And this is the joint work with Enrico Fregnan, Alberto Bacchelli, Larissa Bratz, and Fabio Palomba. So the work focused basically on dark patterns, which is a form of deception that is embedded in UI. And so I give the floor to Linda, and thanks so much.
So thank you a lot for the presentation. Again, I'm Linda Di Geronimo, and today I'm going to present to you our paper with title UI Dark Patterns and Where to Find Them, a study on mobile applications and user perception. So what are dark patterns? So dark patterns, simply put, are user interfaces that are crafted to trick the users. So here I want to show you a really extreme example, again, to make you aware of the issue. So we can read together this checkbox. So if you would like us to no longer continue to stop not sending you special deals and offers every week, please indicate you're inclined to yes by not checking the box. So I don't know how many double negations there are here, but it's for sure at least confusing for the user. So it's not clear if we need to check this or not. So dark patterns can create a domino effect. And what I mean by that is that this is not only a superficial problem of a design issue. These can create the user to perform things they do not really like to do. And these can have the consequence of them accepting privacy consents they do not want to accept, as well as permissions. So in this study, what we did was to understand how ubiquitous dark patterns are and if users are actually able to recognize them and how they are able to learn dark patterns and to spot them. So for time reasons, I will mainly focus on the first 2 points. So let's go to the first point, which is surveying dark patterns. So what we did was to select 230 trending apps from the Android App Store, and we selected only 3 applications. So trending apps, it's hard to define what trending means, but Google used its own algorithm to see which app is most downloaded and how fast. So we picked this application. Then these applications were selected from 8 different categories. For example, entertainment, photography, shopping, family. So there are also games inside. And these are categories that are decided kind of by the Google App Store. And what we did, we used each of these apps for 10 minutes each. And we performed similar tasks among all apps. And at the end, we had a total of 40 hours of recordings. With these 40 hours, we manually classified the videos, and we've done that by pairs, so by 2 of the authors of the paper. And the classification was done by following a taxonomy previously defined. So at the end, we found that 95% of our apps had 1 or more dark patterns. Of course, these also included widespread applications such as Amazon, Netflix, Twitter, and so on. So the most frequent type of dark patterns was nagging. So nagging is sort of a pop-up that interrupts the users with tasks that are unrelated to what they were doing before. And as well as false hierarchy, which it can be really nicely described by these simple pictures. So you have kind of 2 or more options, and the one that favors the app is more prominent than the other. So at the end, we then moved on to the second step, which was to understand if people are actually able to spot these dark patterns and to which extent. To study that, we had an online experiment with almost 600 participants. And I'll show you now the design of the study. So we had a small introduction. So it was done in the form of an online survey. So at the beginning, we didn't mention and we didn't prime them about the concept of dark patterns or anything related to it. We just told them that in the study, they will watch some videos of some apps and they will be asked about evaluating the apps depending on their user experience. So that's what we did. They selected, they saw one of the selected apps that you can see on the top. and they watched just a screenshot of this app. And we asked them if they ever used this app before. Then we showed them a video of 30 seconds video usage of the app. And then only at the end, we asked if they found any malicious design. So they couldn't rewatch the video, and we didn't really define that well what we meant by malicious design. So this was done on purpose to make them define what malicious is. And they also had they could explain it in the survey. And we did this twice, so two random apps. Every user then watched a video of 2 random apps from the 5 selected tools. And then we had the control study with an app that had no dark patterns. So the previous ones had dark patterns. Instead, this last one didn't have any dark patterns. And we did the same process. At the end, we showed them the dark patterns and if they were able to actually spot them. So what we found is that 55% of our users actually did not spot any dark patterns and 20% were unsure. And this is an average among the 5 apps I've shown you before that had dark patterns. So there were for sure apps that went worse than others, but on average, 55% didn't spot any dark patterns at all. So some interesting facts on this last study. So we didn't find any differences among different level of educations on how good people were able to find or not dark patterns. So there were previous studies, not completely similar to what we did, but with the same goals, that found that people with higher level of education were able to find dark patterns better. But at the same time, we also find that our population is on a higher scale of education, so this might cause these results. Then we also found that most users are not really knowledgeable about the concept of dark patterns. And also for this reason, then we checked if people that were knowledgeable on dark patterns were able to spot them more. And it looks like so. So people that are aware of dark patterns spot dark patterns better. So many users were interested in the project, and this was true especially for parents. This because they question if these kind of dark patterns can impact their kids in some way. So on the implication side, so our idea was that our first classification is it's a database that people can access to. So we have a video recordings and the classification data file, and there researchers can extend, redefine the taxonomy, as well as also define the risks of different dark patterns, because it could be that some dark patterns are more risky than others. And also, this classification data set can be used to inspect further applications and to assess how maybe free of dark patterns they are. Also, on the designer side, what we found is that maybe sometimes UIs are copied among different applications. So maybe probably designers do not put these dark patterns intentionally, but there are some kind of designs, patterns that are being used, and there are a lot of dark patterns inside. And therefore, maybe having this support in this classification data set could help them understand that some designs might not be good to mimic. And then indirectly, we support users because since we saw that by raising awareness and making them understand dark patterns, they are more aware of finding them, we think that with our classification and our results, in the future, researchers can also create some platforms to teach users to be more aware of this issue. So thank you all, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much, Linda, for this presentation. So I'd like to start with a question from chat. When you classify the apps, did you consider the purpose of interaction design? For instance, for the nag pattern that you described, a pop-up could suggest a new useful feature of the app. So it might not be necessarily like negative.
So, okay, so we can start from the concept that it's easy to have different opinions on every single UI, and if a UI is a dark patterns or not. So what we did at the beginning was to test more than 2 researchers to discuss and to come up to like a consensus. So we didn't really found, and we based a lot of our experience on our data set. We mainly didn't find anything related to this kind of specific situation, but I would guess that we will put it as a dark pattern if it's intrusive. Because we started with this definition that if anything interrupts you, right, and with something that is unrelated to what you are doing, and in any way favors the app rather than you, then we classified it as a dark pattern. So it really depends on the specific case, I have to say. And I have to say as well that the vast majorities of these nagging are really like rate this app multiple times, for instance, or an ad that pops up and it's done in a way that, you know, if you click it, then the ad opens. So you see, it's I don't know. I have to see the specific case to judge, but by our own classification rules, I will feel like if it's really interrupting you with something unrelated and it's favoring you to use the app more and more and more, we will define it as a dark pattern, yes.
Okay, got it. So Anton just posted another question. Could you elaborate what type of tasks you have performed when eliciting categories of dark patterns at the stage 1? In other words, what are the strategies, tasks to find dark patterns? Can this process be automated?
What we did was first open the app, of course, then terminate, close the app and reopen it again if there is a possibility to have an account to log in, and also to try to delete the account and to log out from the account. Then we went to the menu settings in all apps that had a menu setting. Now we have 7 tasks. I have to remember them. And then we also try to use the app for its purpose. So if it's a game, then we try to play the game for the 10 minutes, and we try to do this task in the 10 minutes we had. The nice thing is, for instance, we decided certain things after a bit of trial and error, and also after using the taxonomy that was previously defined. For instance, if we wanted to check if there was a Roach Motel dark pattern, which is it's easy to get in, hard to get out. So it's really the difficulty to delete your account. We needed to create the account. So that's what we did.
Great.
In the paper that is open access, there are all the lists of the
tasks. Okay, and you mentioned there are 7 tasks, right?
Yeah, I hope I remembered it correctly. Yes, I think so.
Okay, so we have another question from the audience. Kavuz asks, first, thank you for the presentation. How about the results of the control condition? Are there any false detections? Any design pattern that users perceive as dark patterns while they are not really classified as dark patterns?
So we had a low percentage of spotting a dark pattern where there wasn't a low one. Instead, it was really around 80% the ones that didn't find any dark patterns. So that was kind of shown that it's a good control. The only thing is that the control was always at the end. So for sure, users then learned a bit more. But still, despite the fact that they were primed, then we still had a higher majority on that side.
Thank you very much, Linda. I'll thank you again on the behalf of everybody. And I like to invite now our third speaker, Alessio, to set up the slides while I complete the presentation. So the paper we are going to see now is the title is Interacting with Linked Data, a survey from the SwissCHI perspective. This is late-breaking work. It's going to be presented by Alessio De Santo from the University of Neuchâtel, and this is joint work with Adrian Olzer. Essentially, they did a review of linked data, which is structured data, and in the practices of the publications that we typically do in SwissCHI venues, so CHI, CSCW, and so forth. Okay, so I give the floor to Alessio. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. So hello, everybody. My name is Alessio De Santo. I'm a PhD student at the University of Neuchâtel, and I'm very pleased to present this late-breaking work research interacting with the linked data, a survey from the SwissCHI perspective. So this is a representation of linked data. Pretty confusing, isn't it? Basically, linked data refers to a set of best practices for publishing and connecting structured data on the web. Linked data may be open data, in which case they are called linked open data, making it possible to link datasets with existing one on the web. In the past decade, web of data, also known as semantic web, has raised strong interest. And the W3C leaders pushed the linked data principles as an essential element for the semantic web. Among this large amount of data, part of this data, such as governmental statistics, is produced for end-user consumption. But making sense of such data presents huge challenges. As the vision of the web of data is ultimately targeted towards human users, it is not only necessary to study linked data principles from a technical perspective, but it is also crucial to take a human-centered approach. Through this research, we investigated how SwissCHI community contributed to this effort by reviewing ACM SwissCHI venues. So to do so, we started from the following research questions. Who are the end users in the SwissCHI linked data research? What is the context? Where are the design contributions? And how is SwissCHI linked data research validated? Using the search string linked data or linked open data in the ACM SwissCHI digital library, we found a total of 60 papers, excluding not relevant studies such as proceedings, adjuncts, workshops, or other student consortiums and talk papers. We achieved 43 papers that were in-depth reviewed. All contributions were manually reviewed and classified by end user, context, evaluation type, and contribution type. And so to answer research question 1, we distinguished 4 types of linked data end users. The most frequent one was machines, for studies where linked data was machine consumption oriented, investigating, for instance, for algorithm making use of linked data. Then came in blue lay users, depicting users who do not necessarily understand the intricacies of semantic web technologies. For instance, for research, providing users with a natural language interface to query linked data. Then tech users, depicting expert users who are literate with semantic web technologies. For instance, for researchers attempting to understand effectiveness of semantic web authoring tools, and expert users, in yellow here, a category of users which are not necessarily expert of semantic web technologies, but are domain-specific experts and therefore likely to have very good understanding of data structure and content in their domain. Some other papers did not have specific linked data end users, as they were, for instance, papers discussing arguments such as linked data, future challenges, or current uses. For research question 2, we used grounded theories and open coding techniques to make categories emerge, resulting in 6 different contexts. Semantic enhancements was the most present context of research. In this kind of research, authors typically enrich their own data using linked data. The second most popular context was dataset interlinking, where studies, for instance, investigated how to structure and standardize various linked data structures to create a new dataset filling a specific need. Then almost 1/3 of the papers considered the use of linked data to improve the performance of recommender systems. And less papers, respectively around 20, 16, and 11% presented solutions for users to browse, visualize, or query linked data. To answer research question 3, we analyzed the contribution of the various articles, checking whether they contained a practical implementation, describing, for instance, the implementation of a specific software artifact, or a theoretical framework, model, or design recommendation. So crossing these findings on this design contribution classification with the end user one allowed us to see the poor theoretical contribution concerning human end user, especially for lay users. So here, for instance, we can see that for lay users, so we have 90% of practical contribution and only 10% of practical and theoretical. For research question 4 on how SwissCHI linked data research was validated, we could see that the majority of reviewed papers contained no evaluation, focusing mainly on the description of an artifact implementation process. And the remaining papers were almost fairly split equally between quantitative and qualitative evaluations. Finally, in the following chart, we can observe some interesting correlations between context and end user. We can observe a low level of involvement of SwissCHI community regarding linked data lay users research in the context of linked data visualization, and a pretty high and so a very strong correlation between linked data browsing and lay users. However, this last correlation is tainted by the fact that no theoretical contribution could be found on lay users' linked data browsing, and by the poor validation of the practical one. To conclude, despite the inherent limitation of this review, who was limited to the SwissCHI venues, we surprisingly found that linked data in SwissCHI community research were mostly used for machine consumption, and human and user-oriented research rarely include artifact validation or theoretical takeaways, and that there are missing possibilities for end users to query, browse, and visualize linked data, underlying the need for further investigations. So that's all for my side. Thank you for your time and attention. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome.
Thank you very much, Alessio, for this presentation. While we wait for some questions from the audience, I'd like to ask one question. In your survey of linked data, did you study also storage, practices around like linked data, where typically linked data is stored, and how this is exposed to the public?
Not for this study, of course. When I was leading this study, I had some inputs, and I saw from myself where it's stored. What I could say is from the papers that I read and I reviewed, there were a lot of tools, or even, as you're saying, repository of linked data, but most of them were not accessible anymore, or not maintained anymore. So it made very difficult to really check what it was done until now.
So, because in a sense, I mean, we can speculate that one of the main purpose, as you have found out, of these linked data is to have like machines talk to each other, or to have like expose the data to other machines. If these repositories become unavailable after a while, then this is the purpose. It's the data. I mean, the linkage. I mean, becomes useless, and so. Is there, in your opinion, basically some best practices around linked data that you can quickly share with the audience?
Yeah, for sure. If linked data are very useful to be shared among machines, but in my opinion, should be also a better way to be human consumed, to better make use out of this linked data, because they are thousands and thousands of precious data that are shared in this linked data, and for the moment there are very few possibilities to exploit them as a human end user. So machine can use them. As soon as the server is down, it will be maybe hard to set it back, and I think a human possibility to explore and query this data will make us go further in the usage of this precious data that is available on, for instance, the linked open data cloud.
All right. So thank you very much for this presentation. I like also to thank the other presenters once again for their great work in the session. We now have a few minutes of break, and we will be back at 4:40 with the following session. And so I thank you again, and I wish you a good continuation with the conference.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the sixth and the last session of our conference, SwissCHI 2020. My name is Hamed Alavi, and I will be moderating this session titled AI-Enabled Prediction-Oriented. We have 3 excellent papers, 1 full paper and 2 short papers. The papers in this session actually address different challenges, from the detection of affection state to the prediction of indoor environmental qualities, and to improving response rate in course evaluation. So really a wide range of topics, but what they have really in common is how, in a novel way, they capitalized on advances in machine learning to address an HCI question. So without further ado, I introduce the first paper, titled Affective State Prediction Based on Semi-Supervised Learning from Smartphone Touch Data. The paper will be presented by Raphael Wampfler from ETH. This is a collaborative work with Severin Klingler, Barbara Solenthaler, Victor Shinzazi, and Marcus Gross. All from ETH, but very interestingly from different departments, the Department of Computer Science, Chair of Cognitive Science, and Institute of Cartography and Geoinformation, all from ETH in Zurich. So the idea of this paper is to basically find a non-obtrusive way for detection of emotion only based on typing behavior on smartphone. So Raphael, if you're ready, I give the floor to you.
Yes. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Hamed, for the introduction. Affective states are psychophysiological constructs used to characterize the emotions and moods that arise and are experienced while individuals are engaged with the stimulus. In our work, we are representing an affective state using this 3-dimensional model shown here, consisting of valence, arousal, and dominance. Valence indicates if a feeling is positive or negative, arousal describes the intensity of the feeling, and dominance indicates the degree of control over the situation or over the situation. Our novel system predicts affective states of users during smartphone-based chat conversations by using touch data only. Our system works unobtrusively and in real time in the background of a smartphone. The predicted affective states can, for example, be visualized using a pie chart, and as shown on the right side of the slide, the segments are filled according to the level of the corresponding affective dimension. This type of visualization can be useful to convey information to others about the user's current affective state, like status messages. Our approach can also be used to increase self-awareness of users or as part of therapeutic chatbots such as WooBot, which aims to increase the overall mood of users. WooBot infers the mood of users from chat conversations by using natural language processing. WooBot then adapts the conversation to the predicted mood of the user. By considering also touch data with our approach, the bot would be able to increase the mood prediction accuracy. In the past, different work used different data sources to predict affective states on smartphones. For example, Amwa and colleagues used multimodal data consisting of social interactions, browser history data, application and location data, and they assessed their system with 32 participants. On the other hand, Gao and colleagues used touch data such as pressure and speed of touch to predict affective states while users played a game. They assessed their approach with 15 participants. In contrast to this previous work, we conducted a large-scale experiment with 70 participants. And we used chat conversations because chat applications are especially relevant as they currently rank as the most used applications on smartphones. By using two-dimensional heat maps in contrast to raw data, we are also taking into account the spatial distribution of the data, of the touch data. Finally, and in contrast to manually crafting features, we employed autoencoders to automatically extract features from the touch data. In the past, autoencoders have shown to provide large improvements in classification accuracy in other domains. So, for example, Kingma and colleagues were able to improve classification accuracy of handwritten digits by up to 26% by employing autoencoders. As another example, a method for the classification of real-world images reached a reduction of the error by 50% using autoencoders. So our semi-supervised classification pipeline for predicting effective states based on touch data consists of the following three main steps. First, we extract two-dimensional heat maps from touch data. Then we train a variational autoencoder on the extracted heat maps. And finally, we classify effective states based on automatically extracted features from the autoencoder. So we use a sliding window approach to aggregate individual touch inputs into three types of heat maps. The first type represents the touch pressure during typing. The second type provides information about the typing speed and is equal to the time difference between two consecutive touch downs normalized by the distance. And the third type provides information about the speed between touch events. For the down-down speed and up-down speed metrics, we assign their value to every pixel on a straight line between the events. And while touch data is continuously available, ground truth is typically only available in certain intervals, for example, from self-report by asking the user and so on. To make use of the large amount of unlabeled data, we employ variational autoencoders to infer meaningful low-dimensional embeddings from two-dimensional heat maps. A variational autoencoder consists of an encoder and decoder part. The encoder network learns an efficient compression of the heat maps into a low-dimensional space using a deep neural network. The decoder network then reconstructs the input based on sampling from the distribution of the latent space. For the encoder and decoder, we use convolutional and deconvolutional or convolutional transpose layers. We modeled the latent distribution with a multivariate Gaussian parameterized by mean and variance. And in the end, we reduced input dimensionality from 80 times 64 pixels, that means 5,120 dimensions, to 20 dimensions in the latent space. For the last step of our pipeline, the classification, we then added the fully connected classification layer to the learned data encoder and fine-tuned the entire network for the classification of effective states. We have trained an autoencoder for each type of heat map and stacked the latent space of the individual autoencoders for the three types of heat maps. To assess our pipeline, we have conducted a lab experiment with 70 participants between the ages of 18 and 31 from 20 different departments of ETH Zurich and the University of Zurich. And we captured more than 70 hours of touch data. From this data, we extracted over 44,000 heat maps for each type of heat map. In order to trigger different effective states, participants engaged in 4 different Skype conversations with 4 different contacts. Participants were told that the 4 contacts were real people sitting next door. The order of conversations was randomized across participants. The conversations consisted of a shocking conversation about the Rohingya genocide, an exciting conversation about the most beautiful holiday experience of the participants, a rude conversation, and a confusing conversation with a chatbot. every 90 seconds, the participants had to fill in a self-report on a tablet, measuring the affective state in terms of valence, arousal, and dominance on a 9-point scale. In addition, we measured the presence or absence of the basic emotions, anger, sadness, happiness, surprise, as well as stress, the stress level. In total, we collected 1,893 self-reports. We have evaluated our model using leave one user out cross-validation. Our results show that we can accurately predict 3 levels of valence, arousal, and dominance with an AUC of up to 0.84. For valence, the typing speed heat maps performed best. For arousal, pressure heat maps showed the best performance. And finally, for dominance, all types of heat maps performed more or less equally well. Altogether, the combination of the heat maps provided only marginal improvements over the individual heat maps. Our system is also able to predict anger, sadness, happiness, surprise, and the stress level on 2 levels each, with an AUC up to 0.88. And usually affective states change over time. So we hypothesize that the performance of our classifier can be affected by the period over which affective states are constant. For example, if affective states are alternating in short time, it can be much harder to make an accurate prediction compared to when affective states are constant over a longer period. So we recalculated the accuracy measure by considering only the data points for which the affective state was constant over a certain period. That means a specific number of preceding data points with the same class. So a sequence length of 0 here corresponds to considering all data, while a sequence length of 1, 2, and 3 implies that we only consider data points having at least 1, 2, and 3 preceding data points with the same label.
We have 1 minute left.
Yes, by excluding only immediate jumps, that means a sequence length of 1 here, we observe a steep increase in accuracy here. In contrast, increasing the sequence length to 2 or 3 preceding data points provides only marginal improvements. So we have presented the semi-supervised pipeline using automatic feature extraction from touch data based on autoencoders, and we have shown that our pipeline predicts affective states well. In addition, our system can make 2 new predictions every second, and we have also shown that the accuracy depends on a sequence of previous affective states, and that accuracy tends to drop if affective states alternate. Of course, our results also have some limitations. We have used a lab setting, that means a controlled environment, and going into the wild will be then the next step. And our setting is also restricted to chat conversations. So yeah, thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you, Raphael. Very interesting research work and clear presentation. So while we are waiting for the questions from the audience to appear on YouTube, I should mention that, you know, reading your article, I really liked many of the discussions that you have there, especially when you're talking about affective sequence analysis. Mm-hmm. It exemplifies perfectly an analytical look at the machine learning classifier, mm-hmm. and how it can radically improve the classification outcome. So I found that quite interesting. Mm-hmm. I encourage actually all the viewers here to actually read the paper. It's very nicely written. It did not receive an award, but I really think that it deserved it.
Thank you.
I have many questions too, so I start from one question, and that would be, you know, typing and studying the writing on the phone has become increasingly sort of more sophisticated topic to study, right? Because we have a lot of features now. We have personalized features. We have auto-completion, suggestion for words. So I was wondering how in your future research you could account for such new and personalized typing features.
So I have to say, in our experiment, we disabled autocorrection and autocompletion so that the keyboard was the same for all the participants, because we only had 70 participants, and so we wanted to have it consistent among the participants. And for future research, if we, for example, in the wild, for a study in the wild, if you want to include different keyboard settings like as you mentioned, autocorrection or autocompletion, probably there's a need for recruiting more participants to have more data for participants having enabled the autocompletion or disabled the autocompletion, and perhaps also a personalized model would be needed in such a case. So in our setup, we generalized the model among participants. So we did not create a personalized model, but perhaps in the future that could be an option.
Right, great, thank you. I have many more questions, but I will ask you just one more because we don't have much time. And it connects actually to one of the presentations that we had yesterday by chat, and he was talking about sharing data. So what part of the data that you collected you could share with the fellow researchers?
So yeah, unfortunately, due to the ethics committee, to the ethics document we had to apply for, we are a bit restricted in sharing the data, but I have to check what data we actually can share. Perhaps you can share the model, but I think sharing all the data we recorded is probably not possible due to the ethic the document we had to apply for.
Yes, we all have that concern.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Rafael. Excellent work. And now we can actually move on to the second presentation of the session. The title of the paper is HelloWear, Exploring Wearable Interaction with Indoor Air Quality Forecast. And it is authored by Selling, Zhang, myself, and Denis Lalonde. We are from Humanist Institute in University of Fribourg, Department of Informatics. So with a brief summary, the study objective is to look at the evolution of indoor environmental qualities in shared office spaces, and then from the prediction of the evolution of those parameters, we try to, basically, Céline is actually leading that project. She's trying to understand if any communication of prediction with the users can make them engage in preventive actions. But I don't go further, and I leave the floor to Céline.
Thank you, Hamid. So now I'm going to present you with our late-breaking work, HelloWear, Exploring Wearable Interaction with Indoor Air Quality Forecast. Considering the high CO2 concentration in our workplace, we could see that we normally work in a closed environment for 8 hours every day, and the level of CO2 can rapidly increase above the standard threshold, but this is normally not noticed by the occupants, while this becomes a known gas which could damage our health. And the relatively high level of CO2 could already cause the fatigue, headache, or cardiac arrhythmia, or the low cognitive performance. So we've looked at different areas which try to tackle this problem, and mostly it has been researched in the area of architecture and building management, where, for example, SEMBA is an indoor environmental quality performance management platform where they have measured the system, the environment in 4 dimensions, and show that to the building management as a dashboard. While in the human-computer interaction field, the latest work contains, for example, ESTER, where they display the indoor air quality, namely the CO2 level in the wall of the office as an ambient display for the office worker to discuss and monitor their indoor environment. However, we think that the current displays, they are more focusing on the current level of indoor air quality. But when the user notices that it's maybe too late, let's say when the level is already above 1,000 ppm, while they already feel fatigue, then when they open the window at that moment, they already start too late to react to the current status. So we would like to introduce the prediction into the space. So our objective of this study is to prevent the situation of discomfort in advance by communicating the prediction outcome in an effective but non-extrusive fashion. The following research questions are especially tackled. The first is, how would users react when they receive an alert on future discomfort? The second is, what kind of details of prediction results are helpful and persuading for users to take actions? To answer those questions, we have created 3 interfaces, and we have bring up the suite of devices to the user for testing. So we introduced Hilo, which consists of a box, which is for the measurement of the environment, and HiloWare, which is an Apple Watch app. We have created 3 prototypes to see which one is more effective with the users. We have introduced the concept of risk, temporal proximity, and certainty during this design. The details are in our another paper. In the context of this particular experiment, the risk is the CO2 value, which fall into 3 categories: a low risk, medium risk, and high risk. This includes the current outdoor CO2 level and current indoor CO2 level. And for temporal proximity, it is the risky moment compared with the current moment. We present that as a countdown knob on the watch because it is quickly and it's very understandable for the people who wear a watch. It is native to their orientation for such wearable devices. And for the certainty, in this case, is our confidence of our prediction in the risky moment. To better help you to understand how it works, I would like to show a quick demo of the scenario of it this app. So the participant can receive a box for measurement and then open up the Apple Watch app. At the beginning, if there's no risk, then it's blank at the surface. And the first risky moment is predicted, and they will receive a vibration, and she can check it anytime she wants. For example, she decides to open the window, and the status goes back to low risk level, and then it will be updated. To testify this prototype, we conducted a small user study within 2 offices. There are 12 participants at we do the experiment at their own desk to measure their natural behavior. And the experiment is designed to be within subject and in a complete counterbalancing order. And for each prototype, every participant have 20 minutes to experience it. And all of their offices has a window or door for them to has a high level of CO2 in their mind. So on the right is the flow that we communicated to the user how this system works. However, because we think that some of during the days, the office condition could be different in different offices. For example, some of the offices have better CO2 levels, and they may not experience the high risk moment. So for the experiment purpose, we give them a fabricated values on the watch itself. So the observers will change the state of the CO2 level when the user takes action. From our results, we observed that all the prototypes could support users to take actions. For example, they open the door or open the window, or they take a break. Over half of the times when they try the prototypes, they do some actions. And we didn't see any significant effect on the ease of understanding or the motivations for the 3 prototypes. And all of them reflect that the disturbance, the vibration that the watch gives is quite acceptable. The level of disturbance pretty low. Compare the first 2 prototypes. The differences is that one of them showed the certainty, which is the prototype 2. And we didn't see any significant differences this prototype gives. And the 3rd prototype gives the better sense of control to certain users, and maybe this one could be a better one for long-term adaptation. So in conclusion, we could see that the prototype, this visualization could support user in taking preventive actions, and making visible the complete picture of the focus, like the prototype 3, could help participants to better manage their time. And during our informal interviews to the participants, we have drawn several directions for our future studies. The first one is that we could find better ways to build user trust with the prediction. So for now, we only show the current prediction, but some people suggest, let's say, if we showcase the historical prediction against the historical data, they could better understand whether this is accurate for them. And secondly, to better raise their awareness about the indoor air quality condition, if we could show them their physical change, let's say their heart rate, maybe they were better, more concerned about this kind of applications. And the third term is that maybe some of the other dimensions in the indoor environment could also affect their decisions. For example, some participants said that he would open the window also depending on the outdoor noise or the outdoor temperature. Yeah, that's all for my presentation. Thank you for your attention, and we're open for your questions.
Thanks, Solin. It was very clear presentation to me, but that doesn't count. I hope it was clear for everyone. So while we are waiting for the questions on YouTube, and we don't have actually much time, so I'm going to ask you just one question about the relationship or the correlation of air quality, the experience of air quality, and other dimensions of comfort, right? So opening or closing the window has other effects too, right? On thermal comfort, for example. So how can you imagine in your future research accounting for other dimensions of comfort as you want to improve air quality in shared office spaces? Thanks.
I think for example, for our visualization compared to the current monitoring system, it gives you a sense of the time. So for now, we only, if we look at our presentation, that for now we only show the first risky moment as in the prediction. However, we could predict the trend of the CO2 informant. So we do not necessarily just show the first risky moment, but rather, let's say, we could detect the outdoor noise or the temperature and select the moment for the user to react, rather than we give them the first risky moment for them to decide.
Yes. Okay, thanks a lot, Celine. Let's move to the next presentation by TMO. So TMO, if you could already share your slides. So the title of this article is A Conversational Agent to Improve Response Quality in Course Evaluations. So the study objective is to basically enhance. So they are addressing a quite actually interesting question or concern, which is to enhance the quality of responses that teachers receive as evaluation or feedback from the students through surveys. So I invite TMO to share slides, and this is a work done with also Rainer Winkler, Matthias Jollner, and Jan Marco Leimaster from University of St. Gallen, but also University of Kassel in Germany. Timo, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Timo. I'm a PhD student from the University of St. Gallen, and I'm very glad to share today our insights from our research project about conversation agents to improve response quality in course evaluations. If you want to find the paper, you can access the link below or just scan the barcode. And yes. So before I start, I want to share a simple experience from teaching from our university. So we have like a mandatory class in our master lecture with around 220 students, and we use course evaluations to get feedbacks from students in order to improve our teaching quality and content, right? So this is a screenshot from the evaluation software we use. It's a simple web survey, and we often got challenges with that form of feedback, since not many students filled in the complete survey, or often the answer quality of the qualitative question parts were pretty low for us in order to derive action steps. This is actually not a problem which is only happening in St. Gallen, but also depicted in literature. Their course evaluations are described as a method to derive feedback about lecture style, expectations from students, and also qualitative measurement of quality for the university. There are basically two methods to do that. One is quantitative surveys, web surveys, which enable to get a quantitative reach for lecturers. However, the barriers are there: low response quality through so-called satisficing behavior, and low response rates through survey fatigue, meaning that respondents are tired of too many items, and thus not giving good quality. The second element to conduct feedback, to get feedback from students, are qualitative interviews. They are usually much richer in the qualitative insights. However, they are very resource intensive and usually only depict a picture of a small amount of people and not representative. So the current approaches of course evaluations are kind of limited. So our idea was it for our lecture in St. Gallen that we combine the advantages of both approaches, a quantitative reach of the web survey and the qualitative insights from the interviews, through a dialogue-based interaction through a conversation agent. So what does that mean? So we wanted to simulate a conversation between the lecturer and a student through a conversation agent, where the lecturer asks the student in an interview form like conversation interactively about his opinion about the lecture content and about feedback. And so in order to answer our hypothesis, if a conversation agent to positively influence the response quality in course evaluations compared to traditional web survey, we relied on social response theory. So social response theory is also known as the computers are social actors paradigm from Nass 1994. And it says that if you embed human-like elements in interaction artifacts, humans also tend to answer more humanly, right? So we hypothesized that if we change the left side, the static interaction of a web survey depicted in the left side, to a more interactive design, so-called a conversation agent as a social actor, we might get better results since it's a more human-like way of interacting, right? So in order to prove or evaluate our hypothesis, we relied on a field experiment in our lecture, where we wanted to measure the influence of the interaction design on the response quality and the level of enjoyment in a first proof of concept evaluation. We conducted the experiment with 127 participants. Participants were asked to conduct a small course evaluation with 5 questions in the middle of the lecture. And students of the treatment group received the conversation agent here on the right side, and participants of the control group received the traditional web survey here depicted on the left side. The interaction of both elements were quite similar. As you can see, the texts were completely the same, the questions were completely the same. The only thing which we really manipulated was the interaction style. We also did not include any anthropomorphic elements in the conversation agents, since we wanted to first have a proof of concept evaluation of the interaction design. So concerning the results, we measured 2 main variables. That was the level of enjoyment through self-reportings of the students and the response quality of the received answers. The response quality consists of 3 items. That was one time the readability score, measuring the syntactic quality of the texts. Second, we measured self-reported items about how the participant perceived themselves in sharing information. And we used sentiment measurements to measure if there are negative or positive notions in the text, since this is a proven tool from opinion mining for information quality. For all these connections, we received the following results. So people of the treatment group using the conversation agent judged the level of enjoyment significantly higher than people of the web survey. And this leads also to the fact that the response quality of people from the conversation agent was significantly higher in terms of readability score, self-reportings, and sentiments in the texts. Not only these results were better for the conversation agent, but also we measured the technology acceptance of both tools and the perceived use, the intention to use, and the perceived usefulness of the conversation agent was very promising to use this tool in a setting with students on a longer time. To sum up, what are the contributions? So we firstly provide empirical evidence on how to use a conversation interaction on the answer behavior of respondents. We create design knowledge for how to embed this conversation agent as a course evaluation tool, and therefore offer also educators from universities or from university institutions to use these conversation agents to receive better content and higher quality to compare their courses. Right now, in another study, we also embed the anthropomorphic levels of the conversation agent, but this was not part of this study. So if you're interested in this paper, feel free to read it here with the QR code, or if you maybe want to use the conversation agent yourself, feel free to contact us and collaborate with us. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot, Timo. Clear presentation and great work. I encourage again the viewers to read your paper. It's a very nice one. So while we are waiting for the questions on YouTube, I should say that I think while addressing a very specific context, your work can sort of scale beyond the scope of course evaluation, help many other contexts where surveying is required. So just one question from me. When I was reading your paper, I was just wondering if there's any design feature or design choice in the conversational agent that you expect can increase the quality of responses and level of enjoyment for the students.
I mean, in this study, we didn't really manipulate many of these features, right? But in another study, which we currently conducted, we also manipulated the elaboratedness of the language, meaning that one version of the conversation and had more, for example, smileys and emoticons in the text. And in another version, they just had formal questions. This is a design element which you can change. But however, the results are not out yet, right? And or another element which we are now using is also if, for example, in conversation agent, some student just gives like 2 or 3 words or like tokens as an answer, the conversation agent can also re-ask the student, hey, how did you mean that answer? Can you more elaborate on that? That's a very nice feature which is mimicking this interview style, right? And we didn't incorporate that item in this study because we just wanted to see the interaction style and not these advanced features, right? But we already received, without re-asking questions, without measuring any adaptiveness in the conversation agent, we already received a better response quality.
Great, thanks, very clear. Just the last point I wanted to mention is that, you know, literally all of us conducting user research have faced the challenges of conducting surveys, right? Where usually the response rate is less of a problem, but the quality of responses is always under question. I hope that at some point you move towards actually bringing your research as sort of a research tool for all of us. I don't know if in your future research you're looking at that, if you're planning to have such thing.
Yeah, I mean, right now we are focusing on course variations because that's the thing which we can control and where we have like a good access to data, right? Because we can just use it in our courses. But we also received like from companies a lot of interest that they also conduct a lot of surveys for their employees on their feelings or so on. And that might be also a very interesting use case, or as you said, for research data, right? So conversation interfaces with this adaptive re-asking also and engagement might be very interesting. There's actually a very interesting paper from the SwissCHI last year, 2019, which does that for the quantitative data for web surveys. And that's also a good read. Yeah, Kim et al. 2019.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Timo. And with a little bit of delay, that perfectly concludes our session. I again thank our 3 speakers. And also this concludes our conference. Of course, I wish we were gathering under completely different circumstances. However, this was a very nice experience, enjoyable for us, the organizing team, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. We had more than 220 viewers yesterday and more than 250 viewers today. I would like to thank all of the viewers who stayed with us during these 2 afternoons, the speakers and the session chairs. I should also thank the organizing team, Selin, Zhong, Manuel Munda, and Himanshu Verma, and very especially Raphael Tuer. I would like to ask you, all of you guys, to appear on YouTube so we can see your faces. And if you just wave hands so everyone can see you. Everyone's there? Okay, great. So just a couple of more points before we finish this YouTube live stream. I would like to ask all of the presenters and session chairs to connect to the Zoom link that we shared for the second day, like let's say in 2 or 3 minutes, and then we want to have a group photo there. So if you're there and you want to connect to Zoom, we can just have a group photo on Zoom. Let's say in 2 or 3 minutes, we will be there. And then for the ones who are willing to attend our meeting, the discussion of SwissCHI, if you have not registered, please register now using the form, the link that is shared on SwissCHI webpage. And I'm going to send the Zoom link by email to you in 5 minutes. And we start our discussion about SwissCHI in between 5 to like 7 minutes from now. We will start there. So good evening, everyone, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.